Okay, as I said, we've got a completely blank solution. I haven't even created the solution. So, let's see what we do. New project. So we're not doing a Synergy one, we're doing another project type, Visual Studio solution. I'm going to change that to F:\\, and I'm going to call it on vinyl. Let's create a Git repository as well. So we have a solution. Let's add a new project. Now this time we're not going to do C#, of course not. We're going to do Synergy, and we're going to create a Windows, and we're going to call it a class library, and we're going to call it on data underscore server. Now I'm calling it on vinyl data underscore server. I'll explain why as we move forward. It's a class library, it's a normal .NET one, it's not portable, etc., etc. And hopefully that will create our project. The first thing you always do when you create a new project, you delete the class file, because we don't need it. Let's have a look at what that's created for us. I did it on F:\, on vinyl, and there's my solution, and there's my on vinyl. So I am going to bring across a folder with a repository in, okay? So let's get some logicals going. So let's go into properties. First of all, I'm going to change the default namespace. I'm going to change it to on vinyl data. I'm going to get rid of the server. I'm going to leave the assembly name as server. In fact, no, I'm not. I'm going to change that as well. Even though the project is underscore server, I'm going to change those to just data. Then I'm going to go into common properties. If you're not using common properties, you should be, because they're quite cool. RPS mfill is going to be solution dir / RPS main.ism. Okay? Now, if I was to be typing everything throughout this entire day, we wouldn't get anywhere. So I'm just typing these couple ones, and then we'll start copying and all that kind of good stuff. Oops. Repository. There's a reason why I copy and paste. My excuse is I'm looking at 3 different screens. Okay, so I've got a repository. It's got a barcode, an artist, a title, an image URL, and a cost price. It's very simple. Never said it wasn't going to be anything different. If we look at barcode, we'll see some toolkit capabilities in here. So we've got a prompt. If we look at validation, it's a required field. And that's about it. You know, we've not set lots of stuff up on here. If we look at the artist, it's got a prompt and it's got a required field. If we look at the title, it's got a prompt and a required field. If I've got an image, there's no prompt and there's no required field. So you don't have to have an image. And in fact, we can't define images in the repository. This is really just a string that's going to be, all being well, a URL that points to an image. And a cost price that has got a prompt, but you don't have to. You might have been given it as a gift. So it's not cost you anything. That's my excuse anyway. Okay, we've created keys. So we've created the barcode key, and it's simply that field, the primary key. And one other thing in here is if we exit that and go into files, we can look at files. So I've created a vinyl details file. I've created the file name, which is on vinyl data. Okay, on vinyl data is the file open name. So that table mapper is going to accept a value vinyl underscore details, and it will translate it to on vinyl data colon vinyl details underscore ism. Okay, I've assigned the vinyl details structure to it. Okay, simple as that, and that's all we've done in the repository. So what I'm going to do now is create a new file. and it's going to be a text file, and I'll say open, and I shall save it as on vinyl, and I'll save it there, and I'm going to call it, don't call it a text file, call it regen_server.bat. Okay? Well, the name's a bit of a clue, because I'm actually going to do some code generation now. Now, if I was to type all this in, I'd be there all day. So I'm not going to. What we've got here, very simply, I have defined where my templates are. I don't have that folder. We'll grab that folder in a minute. I'll bring that across from my other box. I'm defining where my repository is. That's exactly the same repository as we've just been through. And then I'm going to use these templates. I'm going to use the file.io template to create file.io objects. The data template creates the data objects. The data field mapper allows me to create the field, that's where it is in the data, field, that's where it is in the data, and the table mapper. Okay? So those are the 4 templates I'm going to use. Right. So let's first of all bring those across. So we need our Explorer up here on vinyl, and we will bring our templates folder across. Now these templates are available on the Symphony Framework website, the various versions. There's extra ones in there which we'll use a little bit later on in the demo. So let's save this. Let's open a command window, and let's do a regen. Now I need to test code gen first. So there's a new command line. Yep, code gen's all working. So now I can just use my regen. Did I not spell it regen? Oh, it's regen_server. Okay, so in here we can see that it's code generated the file.io objects. That's the file.io completed. That's the data object completed. That's the field mapper completed. And that's the table mapper completed. First thing we need to do then is bring these into our project. Add existing item, and those are the 4 files. Now if we try and build these, do you think they'll build or do you think they'll not build? They won't. I can assure you they won't. Because it's saying it can't find the namespace symphony.conductor.model. Because what we need to do is say, do you know what, I'm using the Symphony framework here, therefore I need to tell the project that I'm using the Symphony framework. That's pretty easy to do. Let's go to NuGet, manage NuGet packages. And what we can do, you'd have to type this in, but I've got Symphony already pre-typed in, and just select the Symphony framework NuGet package. Simple as that. Current version is 3.2.19, and click the install button. You'll get a little dialog in a moment that says Richard's cool, and you hit the accept button. And hopefully it'll execute a little script down here, install everything. You can see things being added to the references, or you could see things being added. It now says finish at the bottom. If we look at the references, we've now got a whole bunch of things in here. We've got Symphony Conductor and a whole bunch of other Symphony stuff, Adapter, UI Toolkit, Harmony, Crescendo, Chord, Conductor WPF, Conductor and Adapter. Conductor is the main one that we're using. Conductor WPF is some Windows Presentation Foundation extensions. Symphony Core essentially has some debugging stuff in it. Symphony Crescendo, that's some UI things, a couple of tiny little UI controls. Symphony Harmony, that's how we access our data, SQL-like. And Symphony UI Toolkit allows you to pretend that you're doing a bit more toolkitty stuff. We're not going to be using most of those, we're just going to be using the Conductor stuff to start with. But it also brought in a few other things. It brought in Service Bus, and it brought in Newtonsoft JSON. Steve talked about the JSON stuff in his sessions. That's how Symphony Harmony serializes and deserializes the JSON data so you can communicate with Symphony on a remote bridge server. And there's a few other things, but basically, hopefully, if we're lucky and we're having a good day, if we rebuild that now, it should build. And at the bottom, you can see that it says, or it did say, build succeeded. And we can see it down there. Okay?